pleasure to be here, to be joined by so many of you in person, and a warm welcome to those online as well, to tell you today a little bit about how we're approaching biophysical characterization and developability workflows paired with our discovery efforts. So just, you've seen this slide before yesterday, but to give you a bit of an overview of where do we sit. So the biophysical characterization is represented by the protein sciences, by protein production, and biophysical characterization divisions. And we work very closely with our discovery colleagues, but also with our new cell line development division that you'll hear all about in a few minutes. So I don't think I need to tell you the relevance of this. We've heard it many, many times today and in the past few years, but we do know that our first efforts are driven by biology. And when we try to optimize for functionality and push for affinity, we often start tweaking and messing with other properties, namely charges, for example, which, whilst we are improving functionality, we might not necessarily be improving the biophysical properties that will then have an impact in our ability to turn these molecules into actual products, so in terms of their manufacturing, stability, etc. And the danger of these, as also we've heard, is that it might lead to extended CMC timelines or even make some target product profiles simply impossible to achieve. And that's why we find that it's so important to include fit-for-purpose biophysical characterization screenings from as early as possible. And so in the next few slides, I'll try to demonstrate or to show you some examples of workflows that we have and how we are approaching at the different stages that these biophysical techniques can help you save time and improve quality. So for an early stage, as I mentioned early on, it needs to be fit for purpose, right? So at early stages, we know that the availability of material is not great, that the timelines are very short, and that we're working with many molecules. And so it is important to use high throughput methods that have very short timelines, do low consumption of material, and so it's mostly single point analysis, but that allow us to focus on key properties that can become red flags later on. So we're talking about melting, as we've heard, polyreactivity, propensity to self-interact, etc. And so this is a very general or a very simplified workflow of discovery and the different stages. And so we try to highlight using the different colors, so the protein sciences color, where do we start working with our colleagues. So at the stage of selection of the lead panel, it is important to do an in silico assessment, looking at the molecular properties and also potential liabilities that can be very quickly sorted. And once we move to have purified material, then in characterization for the lead selection, then we start including experimental assays on biophysical side by side with the functional characterization. And these are assays such as AC-SINS, polyreactivity ELISA, TM and TAG, Higgs scores, obviously the percent monomer determination using size exclusion, CESDS also for sizing and DLS. So here we have two examples. I'm afraid to say we're part of the ELISA crew here at Rare Journey. And so we do have an in-house assay for polyreactivity against DNA and insulin, which can help us predict non-specific interactions. And also, we have developed a Higgs method to determine Higgs scores, because we do know these are important not only for non-specific interactions, but is also sometimes responsible for something we've heard. It's called stickiness, informally, and this can be a problem for stability, but also during process development. And so it's something we want to look at very early, and particularly for some formats, it can be even more relevant. Different examples, a few more examples are the AC-SIMS assay. Also, I won't get too much into that. We've heard about it, and it has to do, it can help us predict possible issues with viscosity, poor solubility, aggregation, etc. And looking at melting and onsets of aggregation, at this stage, we use very simplified methods. So we use intrinsic fluorescence for determination of melting temperatures and assessing protein unfolding, and also the propensity to aggregate, so the temperature of onset of aggregation using SLS. And particularly also looking at how these two correlate, right? So if we start seeing an onset of aggregation because we are forcing the unfolding of the protein, or if this happens before, then there's something that we need to consider, because there's an intrinsic propensity to aggregate. Another example, as I mentioned, was the size exclusion, so looking at the percent monomer from affinity purifications, because we know the aggregates and the presence of aggregates can have an effect on efficacy and also lead to immunogenicity. And one other method that we use to do size profiling, and we resort to this method at various different stages, is the CE-SDS, that can give us a good assessment of purity and again, highlight any issues of future immunogenicity. And that kind of is an example of some of the classical methods that we use at early stage. Obviously, each project is a project. Its format might have different needs. Not all assays might be suitable, so we're always happy to look into things, into the more specifics. For the late stage, then, we start changing a little bit how we need to look at things. So we're talking about a much smaller group of molecules, and we really want to get to know these molecules, right? So we want to understand and know their molecular properties, but also we need to understand how they behave in time. So at this point, we start caring about their stability. And as we move towards this, then target product profile starts having a more important role. We're no longer talking very general properties, so we want to see if they can be developed, formulated into the final dosage form, or to enable a given route of administration. We heard of the trend for sub-Q. And the way we do this is by using accelerated stability studies, design forced degradation studies if appropriate, and also looking into pre-formulation. Yeah? So these studies are very helpful for developability. They're very helpful looking into possible formulation, but they also allow us to generate windows of operation, not just for formulation, but for process. And at which stages do we do this? So we start with a very simplified approach at lead identification stage, looking at the different size and charge profiling, accelerated stability, which we tend to monitor both the size and charge as well, and early pre-formulation studies side by side with the functional characterization, looking into kinetics and functional assays. And also later on, for lead optimization and in support, and I'm going to mention, Michael, the cell line division, then there's a wider set of techniques and a wider set of assays that become relevant because we're very close to CMC, so we need to start really designing that strategy and understanding what our potential critical quality attributes might be. And so we have a suite of assays designed for that. And that contains characterization under non-stressing conditions, so really profiling the molecule into all aspects, and also the as I mentioned, accelerated stability, usually by isothermal stress and also freeze-thaw, but then the force degradation, shear stress, deamidation, oxidation, resilience to low and high pH during process, and very often high concentration stability. So a few examples of assays that we have in our toolbox and we use at this stage with the PEG precipitation assay. So this assay allows us to look at apparent solubility, so ranking the leads at this stage, and that can give us indication of ease to develop at high concentration. We look at, as I mentioned, the charge profiling. We use isoelectric focusing for that, and actually in this example we can see that an incubation for 2 weeks at 37 degrees, we do see the changes. So we do see the change in the profile, and that we start having new and more acidic species. In this particular circumstance, we have attributed it, and we believe this was most likely due to deamidation. So this would be a prompt to then design a force degradation study looking into force deamidation, possibly peptide mapping, to understand where it was happening. Again, for late stage and for early development stages, it is important to do the glycan profiling. It's a very common post-translational modification that can have huge impact on the mode of action. And as I mentioned early on, I mentioned the melting temperature. So at the late stage, we'll be revisiting that, but we'll be revising it with a technique that can give us a lot more insight and detail, which is differential scanning calorimetry. That is used to measure the TM. It's quite a relevant property with the unfolding, and here we have an example that a single point mutation into the CH2 region has caused a significant shift, and in this case it was not great, as we had a significant decrease in the melting temperature. So finally, I also wanted to give you an example, because I'm focusing today in biophysical characterization, but we are actually a protein science division, so we do have a strong group in protein production. And this is an example of how the two units collaborate. So how we use our mass spec facility in this case to support production. And in this case, we were challenged to try to generate alpha-cosylated antibodies with our regular cell line. We typically use XPCHO for this. And so we used the paper that was published in 2013 that makes use of CNG2FF reagent to remove fucosylation. So we decided to try by adding it to our cell media and see if we could generate alpha-cosylated antibodies. So this is the peptide mapping. I do not expect you to find any difference here, okay? This was just an illustration. But I did wanted to show you, or try to show you, there is a shift. It's a very small mass, and so it's difficult to spot graphically. It's very well done by the software. And so again, I don't expect you to see the numbers, but there is a shift from here to here. This is mass to charge, so we're talking about very, very, very small masses. And we were able, using for all conditions above 50 micromolar of the use of this reagent, to completely abolish fucosylation. And I haven't shown here the data, but there was no impact on yields or cell viability. So it was just a brief example of how our analytical capability can support different areas and different areas of the business. But bringing us back to the developability and the biophysical characterization, I do hope I was able to give you some examples of how we are addressing this at the different stages. So at early discovery, focusing on custom screening cascades using high throughput methods with low consumption and fast analysis that really focus on key properties. And at a later stage, with workflows that are tailored to project's target product profile, focusing on helping you design an efficient CMC strategy, and also including a lot of the stability that we didn't look at early on, and in early development with QC workflows that support stablecoin selection. And with this, I just want to say thank you all for your attention, and if there's anything that you believe we can help you with, please get in touch. It will be our pleasure to support you. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. We continue the presentation with Antonio Barroso, who will talk about cell line development at FairJourney.
Sorry, just testing how this works. So thank you for all coming and for being here. So my name is Antonio. I'm going to talk about stable cell lines for antibody production and also for discovery. So as you already know, the company has a main goal to be able to provide all the service that clients need along their pipeline. So we started by having antibody discovery followed by antibody engineering. Then we added the protein production and biophysical characterization. And very recently this year, a new division was created that has a responsibility of making cell line development. So the cell line development will main focus on two branches. So the first one will be research related, so be able to generate tools that can support antibody discovery projects. The second one will be to generate stable cell lines that be able to produce your lead candidate antibody that you can further take on for other CMC projects. So I will talk about a little bit of each one of these branches and how the procedure is being set up at this moment at the company. And we hope that in the future they can be used by you as a service and included in your pipeline. So moving on to the stable cell lines for discovery. So the idea is to be able to generate stable cell lines that express the antigen. So then you can use them for several processes in the discovery, namely, for example, for immunization, selection and screening, or even characterization that can help you to find the right antibody at this stage. Regarding the workflow that we intend to have, so we have the vector construction where we have in-house the PCDNA 3.1 mammalian expression, and we will clone your genes of interest in this vector, but we can also use vectors that you have or others that you need. Regarding the cell lines that we have available at home, it's CHOK1 and HEC293 that are the most used in our projects, but we also can use the ones that you prefer. Then the idea is to transfect the cells using the electroporation method to achieve high efficiency, and then select these cells based on a selecting agent. Then we'll characterize the pools generation to see if they are expressing the antigen of the interest, and we can further move on to single clone if that's your needs, or we can select the pools according to the expression level that they want, or according to your needs for further discovery projects. In the end, we can deliver to you the cell line for your own purpose, or we can use it on the service for the different tasks that we have defined during the work package. So the other part of the cell line development is related to the ability to generate a stable cell line that is able to produce the antibody lead candidates. The idea is to have a single cell derived clone that can produce high and consistent levels of the antibody, and then this production can be supported for animal studies in early PD or PK non-GMP conditions. So for this, the platform that we are setting up in the company is a platform that is licensed from Merck Sigma with the chosen cells. Here you have like an overview of the characteristics. So they can be used for monoclonal antibodies, bispecifics, or FC fusion productions. He has relatively short timelines for the research cell bank formation, so 16 to 18 weeks. The average yield of the clones that he gets from there is from 4 to 8 grams per liter, and with a high stability of 16 generations. Most important is a well-validated platform with more than 100 molecules in phase 1 to 3 of clinical trials, and several already approved in the market. As a vector, we will use a single vector that has some optimized sequence that allow high integration efficiency and faster selection pools, and I'll go more in detail on that on the next slides. And the selection system will be based on the glutamine synthase because the cells are GS knockout, and I'll also explain a little bit more in the next slides. So regarding the show cells that are in the platform, so they are originated from the European collections for show K1 properties. They are GMP manufactured, fully viral tested, completely traceability, so they are regulatory friendly. They are adapted to grow in suspension in chemically defined and animal component-free media. And they are deleted for the gene of glutamine synthase. So basically, the glutamine synthase is the enzyme that is responsible for converting glutamate and ammonia and glutamine, that is an essential amino acid for the growth of the cells. And the way we select the cells, stable clones, is by transfecting these cells with a vector that contains the glutamine synthase and also the genes of interest of the antibody, and grow them in media without glutamines. So this means that only the cells that integrate stable the plasmid and are able to synthesize the glutamine will be able to survive. So in this way, we will do the metabolic selections without addition of any inhibitors or any antibiotics. Regarding the vector that we will use, so this vector contains the DNA sequence that are called ubiquitins chromatin opening elements. So basically, they are DNA sequence that are methylation-free. So they are derived from housekeeping genes that are involved to prevent the silencing of the linked genes and maintain the consistent transcription. So the vector by itself has two different OCE elements. One is located in the upstream light chain expression cassette, and the other is located between the heavy and the light chain expression cassette. And ideally, it will sustain expression and stably high gene maintenance. Data that is come from Merck show us that when they use a control vector or a vector that contains this DNA sequence for generating a cell line for a monoclonal antibody, throughout the process, they always see higher number of producing clones when they use the OCOA vector. And this will allow us to reduce the number of pools and clones to secrete, and also to significantly reduce the timelines to get your cell line. So here we have an overview of the process for the ones that are not familiarized with this kind of workflow. So we have 4 blocks. The first one is the pool generations. The second one, single cells cloning. The third, characterization of the cell banking, and the fourth, stability assessments. So we will start by cloning in the vector that I mentioned, the genes of interest of the antibody, and then we will transfect the cells by electroporation. Then we will grow these cells in media without glutamine so that we can select the clones that are stable. And then we will assess these pools, not only at level of the IgG production, but also at the level of the specificity. So to see that you really are producing the antibody that binds to your target, but also, like Teresa mentioned, we also do biophysical characterization so that we are sure that the molecule has the right properties. Once we have the pools, we can then move on to single-cell monoclonality. So at this point, we are looking to several different equipments that allow you to see the one cell per well, and also imaging so that you can have a full report of monoclonality assurance that you can further take ahead for IND reports in the future. And once you have the single clones available, we will test them for the productivity and select the ones that are best, not only in terms of production, but also in terms of a comprehensive QC that is made to ensure, once again, that they have the right properties. After selecting the clones, then we'll move on to research cell banking, where they will be expanded. The clones will also be testing at the functional level to ensure, once again, that they are able to bind to the target or do what they should do. And after it, we can do the stability assessment, where the cells are going through 60 to 9 passage, and we will quantify the productivity in terms of IgG, but also cell viability and cell growth. So here we have, for the 3 blocks, pool generation, single cell cloning, and characterization cell bank, the type of assays that we will do for the characterization. Like Teresa mentioned, it's very important to confirm that already in this stage, you already have everything that you need in terms of molecule characterization, so that we are safe for proceeding in each step. In the first step, we can go from specificity binding assays for ELISA, for example, but also a level of size and purity assessment for HPL. Then once we proceed and it becomes more specific, we start to increase the type of assays, namely going, for example, for charge heterogeneity and also configuration by max spec. And if it's important, in your case, for the antibody, looking to the glycan profiling. In the third phase, where we do the research bank, where you must be sure that the clones that you are picking are the ones that then will be moving forward for example, generation of master cell banks, or even production of the protein or antigen that you need for your assays. Then we will do the functional characterization assays regarding to the functionality and specificity, but also several biophysical analytics characterization, namely also from the one that I referred before. We'll test the banking for biosafety, so advantages, mycoplasma, sterility, and fungal, and we also evaluated the copy number of the gene that was integrated. So with this slide here, the idea is just to show you that although we have all these assays described, Vergene has also several capabilities that can support at level of function characterization all the pipeline in cell line development that you can integrate, not only at level of function characterization, but also at level of biophysical characterization, looking, for example, at level of characterization under non-stress conditions, or stability screenings, or even storage stability. In the end, once you have the cell line developed, we can produce the protein for you, in case you want it, or we can store your cell vials in our cold storage so that they are always there with us and ready to go whenever you need the production. Or in case you want, we can transfer them to you so that you can use it at your purpose. So as a last slide, just to show an overview of the things that you maybe do with us. So the idea is to provide you the ability to generate already stable cell lines for antigen production at level of the lead discovery setup, so that we can already have some tools for your discovery project, but also being able to generate stable cell lines that can also produce your already lead candidates. At the same time, I think it would be also important, and even more is one of the things that is even seen every more, to start already cell line development earlier. So already in the time where we had doing the lead optimization, and you have several pre-candidates, so that we can gain time forward and just move with the ones that you need, already having the pools, for example, generated. Yeah. And thank you all for your attention.
So Teresa and Antonio, if there's any questions from the audience, you can ask them now or in the course of interactions with Fair Journey, but I think it's gratifying to see that you're expanding your capabilities and solve issues that clients may have with getting this whole process done. So any questions?
Yeah, just a small one. We've heard a lot of talks about multi-specifics and the more increased difficult formats. And I was wondering whether your pipeline supports the bioanalytical capabilities to get the biophysical properties. Do you also envision starting to produce these for your clients as well, the multi-specific formats, as long as they allow you to do so, of course? Yeah.
So, sorry, as far as transient expression goes, we already do that. Actually, we have also seen the increase in demand for that. And so we do have many different workflows. So we do have a huge capability with all sorts of chromatography, both in terms of preparatives and analytical, to be able to support such stages. And with the analytical capability that we do have, we can include in-process controls and really quality assessment points to ensure that we're able to deliver the high, not just pure material, but high quality, and that we can assess using the mass spec, most likely, exactly what we have.
And that would extend to then cell line development as well,
Yes.
post that, right?
Yes.
Thanks.
Peter?
So we might also see a revolution because of AI, and we heard that you can optimize molecules in silico also for developability, but especially in discovery with AI. What are your capabilities and plans around introducing that as well?
So I think that is very much something we're looking into and giving the steps within our discovery division. And obviously, as far as this side is concerned, we do have the high throughput methods that are able to cope with these new workflows and this new drive using AI and bioinformatics.
Any more questions from the audience?
Just completely out of curiosity to follow up on the first question. On the cell line development, you mentioned you have a one vector system for multi-specifics. Is it one vector system as well, or do you kind of balance with chains, things like that?
So we have only one vector. The idea is then balance with the chain, so doing the transfection with two vectors where you can ratio the heavy and the light chain that you are using. So that's the idea. Yeah.
And finally, one of the hot topics on cell line development is monoclonality, trying to make it in one round. How are you going to address that?
The monoclonality assurance?
Yeah.
So the idea is, so we are currently looking for equipment that allow us to do the seeding of one cell per well and imaging this kind of well, so that we can then trace back once, for example, we have the growth of the clones and we identify the ones that are producing and good, we can trace back and really see by imaging and outgrow if it's really coming from one cell. Also, there are kind of equipments already that give you some kind of reports that can then be used for filling the IND, for example, support in the future.
And will kind of the traceability package then will come with the service as well? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I think there are no more questions from the audience, so I'd like to thank Teresa and Antonio again.
Thank you.